The race for 2024 is in full swing. Trump continues to hog the spotlight.
No, get those lights off!
While many tremble at the thought of attacking him, no one has a problem directing fire at another competitor. Vice President Kamala Harris has slammed the Florida governor as a racist over his state social studies curriculum. Most people would fold and move on. Curiously, DeSantis has doubled down on his curriculum. Is there something more here than meets the eye? Also, a recent case has reopened the debate. Can Catholic schools remove teachers and students over public differences on church teaching? And should they? And the debate over term limits for our octogenarian public servants is getting old. It's about time someone does something. All this and more on this week's edition of the LOOPcast. God bless everyone. Welcome back to the LOOPcast, where we talk faith, culture, and politics. It is Tom, Erica, and Josh. And we have another good show ready for us today. And we're going to start with the man that everyone wants to attack right now, Governor DeSantis, running for president here. He's become kind of a popular man to target. And the latest targets have been specifically over a social studies curriculum that he's developed, that Kamala Harris, vice president, has really taken time out of her schedule to attack him on. And I think it's worth kind of going over at this point because some people may have heard of it. This phrase that slaves somehow benefited from slavery is the mainstream smear. Both Republicans have used it and Democrats have used it. Is there truth to this statement? Can we get straight to the curriculum? What's going on here, Erica?
So the Florida State Board of Education does have new standards, and as part of Governor Ron DeSantis's attempt to revamp the state education K through 12, and really part of his battle against CRT and wokeism in the schools, they came out with this new 216-page document with the 2023 standards in social studies. And unlike many states, they have added special studies for minority groups like African American history. They have a revamping of the Holocaust studies and slavery all over the world. And there's this one line in the document that says, quote, "Slaves developed skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit." And it goes on to say that after slaves are freed and liberated, some of them were able to pull themselves up out of poverty by using skills learned such as blacksmithing, tailor, all of these sort of crafts are mentioned in the curriculum. And this is the phrase that's being pulled out by Kamala Harris and leftist objectors to pretty much anything DeSantis does. And they're saying that, quote, Kamala Harris actually flew down to Jacksonville, Florida. Right. She flew down to Jacksonville, Florida at the drop of a hat to give this big speech where she denounces the curriculum as, quote, propaganda from, quote, extremist leaders. And she's accusing DeSantis of, quote, replacing history with lies. They dare to push propaganda to our children. We won't debate that enslaved people benefited from slavery. Adults know what slavery really involved. And so she went on and on like this for about 45 minutes. And of course was picked up in all the news media outlets. And it's interesting, if you go and you look at the curriculum itself, this line comes not in the context of discussing chattel slavery in the United States, but in the context of discussing slavery as a worldwide and chronological throughout history phenomenon. So it's talking about white on white slavery, black on black slavery, American on African American slavery. And so it's disingenuous. It is a blatant lie for her to go out there and say that somehow DeSantis is glorifying slavery or saying it was good for people. That's not at all what's happening there.
The View had an aneurysm over this. I believe Whoopi Goldberg said that they want to eliminate black people and everything. And
did you see what Joey Reid said over at MSNBC? She's like, you can't even say slavery was bad now in the GOP. And and what made me actually most upset about that clip was she had Michael Steele right there on the studio, right there with him. And he's like, now, if you remember, Michael Steele was the chairman of the Republican National Committee from 2009 to 2010. And so she makes this outlandish statement, totally ridiculous. She's lying and she knows she's lying, right? And he's like, yep, that's right, yep. I'm like, no wonder the GOP got its butt kicked during the Obama era because you were in charge, Michael Steele. What an idiot. But he's been an MSNBC favorite Republican for a long time. So it's like, I guess we get over it, right? But then why is Senator Tim Scott making the same claim? Why is he nodding along with it? Well, because he's running for president and he sees this as an opportunity to take out DeSantis so he can be the number 2 guy. And why is Byron Donalds, the congressman from Florida, also doing it? Well, that's because if DeSantis were to be the nominee, then his lieutenant governor would become governor if he got elected president, right? Byron Donalds wants Trump to get in there so that he can run for governor when DeSantis is done. That's why he backed Trump. That's fine. Go ahead. Play those games. I get it. But the vice president of the United States is lying through her teeth on this, and if Republicans are parroting her lines, they need to get a swift kick in the butt because it's a bunch of baloney. Okay. The question, what this all comes down to is, did some slaves learn some skills that could have possibly benefited them after they were liberated? Yes, it's possible. Yeah, actually, some of them could have acquired some skills. Does stating that's a fact? Does stating that fact say, oh, actually, slavery was kind of good? Heck no. No one ever said that it was a good thing. I mean, it drives me
no
insane.
Good faith person would ever believe that. Like that's just such an unbelievable lie to think that some people would actually think that. So to charge it kind of reminds me of like Jesse Jackson era like race baiting. Like they knew that they could kind of twist this very small part of a social studies curriculum, which by the way, Florida is number 1 in education in many metrics. But they found this one little part of the small social studies thing to which they could twist into the race discussion in America, which of course, as we all know, has been used to the benefit of many politicians. It's one of the most toxic conversations, I think, one of the most toxic discourses we've had over the past, 20 years. I mean,
and
Obama
it
really
seem
kind
like
of set in an overdrive.
suddenly they have a Confederate-based, Klan-based history book. I mean, it's a bunch of baloney.
Right. And you know what's funny too is like a lot of people were calling on DeSantis to be like, oh, just apologize, just reword it. I actually think that good for DeSantis for not backing down to this. I think that it says a lot more about his character and his beliefs because he actually consulted a doctor. There was a very qualified, what was the guy's name? I don't know.
Dr. William B. Allen, a very well-respected Black historian. And I love, he did an interview too to kind of counter Kamala Harris's charges that this is, and he's a Black man. He has been studying this for years, very compassionate, but of course he's conservative, so he's a traitor to his people or whatever. But he actually said, he's like, quote, he said, we need to tell the people's stories the way they told their stories, not to fit our expectations. I mean, and that is just an honest way to look at history, is to use primary sources and to let the people tell their story. And men and women who survived slavery in the United States, who were emancipated under Lincoln and then were coming up under Reconstruction, they were proud of the fact that they had skills. And the fact is they learned them while they were slaves. And they used these skills as free men and women to make a better life for themselves and their families and their children and posterity. And, William Allen's point was that, look, it is dangerous and it is absolutely reckless to be throwing this card out there of like, all Republicans hate Blacks. They want to erase Blacks. They think slavery is good. I mean, that is a dangerous card to play, and it's playing with fire. It's reckless. And Kamala Harris should know better.
She knows. She does know.
Of course.
Well, that's kind of how she made her way to the White House. So,
and it's brilliant. We were talking about this, Tom. Like, it's smart. It's dumb, but it's smart because most Americans are going to hear one line on MSNBC about Florida pro-slavery curriculum, and that's all they'll remember because it is such a hot topic. So 6 months down the road, they'll just be like, "Oh yeah, DeSantis, wasn't he like slavery, right?" That's just how the public's mind works.
Well, you say the public.
And she knows that.
Half the public, and that public that watches
half the public's lack of
and
mind
it's
work.
it's not just MSNBC, it's AP and all the mainstream so-called legacy media outlets that just parrot all this stuff. And again, that's one of the problems we have in this country, where half the country just decides to accept narratives based on absolute lies. And so it's like, how do you have a debate on this? It's like, this is not what the curriculum said at all, and you're just going to make it up. Okay, great.
Well, DeSantis wanted a debate, right, Tom?
He did, yeah. He did invite Vice President Kamala Harris down to Florida to talk about it. She said you could stop by on your way to the border. So she declined that invitation, unfortunately. This is kind of a moment where I think DeSantis shines because he didn't back down. And it was kind of the same thing in Florida, too, during COVID. It reminded me of, like, there was a lot of people pressuring him on the COVID stuff. And he's like, no, this isn't right. I'm not going to do that. So I don't know. I'd like to see more of this from DeSantis. And I actually think the fact that he's not backing down has caused people to kind of like take a second look. Like, oh, you were charged with being pro-slavery and you're not backing down. Like, wait, maybe he's not pro-slavery because that's such an insane position. I mean, that was just my 2 cents on it. But another thing that he's being attacked on, and this is something too, I think that's of course near and dear to us at Catholic Vote and as Catholics, it's the pro-life issue. So Susan B. Anthony List has openly chastised DeSantis following an interview he did with Megyn Kelly. And so he told Megyn Kelly that he will always come down on the side of life and promised that he will be a pro-life president, but he did not specify what kind of federal protections for the unborn he supports and emphasized that the country is divided on abortion. So his response earned a rebuke from SBA president, who has called these remarks a dismissal and that it was unacceptable to pro-life voters. What do we think on this? Warranted? Unwarranted?
I mean, I like Marjorie Dannenfelser. She's a great pro-life advocate, and she's been trying to get President Trump to sign off on the 15-week national ban on abortion. Like, we should be able to protect unborn children in every state, at least at the 15-week mark. And then if we can increase the protections in other places like Texas and Florida and all that kind of stuff, great. But at least a national standard, start somewhere. Let's get something. And so she's trying to do that. Donald Trump, after the midterm elections, that went kind of poorly for the GOP, he blamed the pro-lifers, which is like, excuse me?
Yeah.
Like, what? I think part of it was candidate quality was a little subpar, and so,
Dr. Oz, anyone?
Yeah, exactly. So, SBA attacked Trump because like, hey, why are you blaming pro-lifers for this? And I agreed with her on that. I was like, good. Like, that was criticism that Trump deserved. And so I think she's trying to be fair to each of the presidential candidates because she wants to try to get all of them to commit to a national 15-week ban. And so if she's attacking Trump for not committing to a 15-week ban, then she's gonna attack DeSantis for not doing a national 15-week ban. I mean, if I'm DeSantis, I'd be like, hey, I got a 6-week ban here in Florida. You should be pretty happy with that, which of course they would be, but we still want to get you still want a national standard. Like other countries, like, throughout Europe, most countries don't allow abortions,
anything past 20 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, so it's like,
certainly 20.
So why can't we
12.
do at least, have the United States, land of, where we believe in the right to life, and liberty and the pursuit of happiness? Why can't we have a national standard as well? So obviously we'd love it for all children to be protected from the very moment of conception, but at least if we could get 15 weeks. So I think that's the lens in which she's looking at this. And so I'm going to give her, I understand where she's coming from, I guess. She's trying to play it fair so she's not playing favorites, in other words.
Right. And can I ask then the question I think that we're getting to here? It seems like people have done nothing but criticize DeSantis' chances as president, saying that he's uncharismatic, his campaign's falling apart, he just said to let some people go, he's burning through dollars. Everyone says he has no chance, and yet it seems like people are kind of obsessed with him. It seems like he just constantly is being attacked from all sides at all times. Why do you think people are so obsessed with him? Why do people feel the need to constantly attack him?
Well, so, in 2016 cycle, everyone was attacking Trump because he was the number one in the polls. And so DeSantis could say, well, maybe every reason everyone's attacking me is because I'm also, well, you're not number one. The reason why they're attacking you is if you're running for president on the Republican side and your name is not Trump, if you're Vivek, you're Tim Scott, you're Asa Hutchinson, any of these guys, and you want to be the second candidate, right? You want to be second place so that you can be the guy to be replace Trump in case he stumbles, right? So the incentive for the guy you've got Trump way up at the top, then you've got DeSantis like here, and then you've got 7 dwarfs, okay? So each of those guys at like 0.5% or 0.1% or 0.1000%, they're all going to try to take out DeSantis so that they can be that alternative. Because there's a good 25% of the party that's like, gosh, I kind of like to have someone other than Trump. And right now, like almost all of those voters are going for DeSantis. And there's just a few, like I say, at the bottom for the 7 dwarfs. Who cares, right? So they all
that's a Snow White remake right there.
There you go. They all are trying to take out DeSantis so that they could be the alternate, right? And Trump, he doesn't have to attack the guys at 1%. He has to attack the guy, DeSantis, who's at like 25%, so that if DeSantis the wheels come off his wagon and he slips down to 10, 12, 7, then Trump can lift up his hands and say, hey, I'm the guy. And in fact, he had a smart aleck comment, which I thought was pretty funny, talking about it. He goes, all this discussion about the debate in Milwaukee, and he's like, I think it'd be great. Have them all debate. Let everyone debate, in fact, because they're trying to get the 40,000 donors and all the different rules so that they can participate in the first debate in Milwaukee, right? In August 25 or so. And so he's like, let them all debate. I want to find out who's going to be the best vice president for me. Ingenious. It's ingenious.
Oh man,
it's
the guy has panache.
That's
what
right,
can I
and
say?
that's what I'm
Right?
saying. Like, and DeSantis is still. I think DeSantis has got, from an issue standpoint, he's a lot better than previous Republican presidential candidates, not including Trump. Right. So, like Scott Walker, he ran for president and fizzled. Okay, so I don't think DeSantis is going to fizzle quite like Scott Walker, but it's still too conventional. Like. It's not just like DeSantis was hoping, oh, wait, I'm kind of like Trump without the crazy. I've updated my views. I'm more populist. I'm more tough on immigration. I'm more, ready to fight the media or whatever. And I've got the right views. I'm not going to be for, trade giveaways, all that kind of stuff. But he's still missing something. It's still like you're still running I would call it a conventional presidential campaign. Like now, the letter he sent to Vice President Kamala Harris, hey, why don't you come on down in Florida? We'll debate that. Okay, good. More of that kind of stuff would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But if he doesn't start
good.
lining up more of those kind of things where he's just going on offense, then I don't know. In other words, like he's got to have something more going for him.
Yeah.
I mean, I like him. I love him.
That being
I think
said,
he's a good guy.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I do want to just go back to the Megyn Kelly interview for a second, because when the SBA announcement came out, the statement came out, I was like, oh, I'll just go watch it. So I watched the interview. I'll link it in the show notes. It's worth watching because, yes, he didn't directly say, I want a 6-week ban at a federal level or I want a 15-week ban. But what he did specify was impressive. And I agree, Josh, like it's too conventional, but he does have, I think he has the idea, because he said, as president, I would appoint federal judges and Supreme Court justices who defend the Constitution. He would end abortion tourism in the military, which is a really big deal, and that is within the presidential powers. And he said he would sign pro-life laws coming from Congress, but that he just doesn't see Congress getting to that point anytime soon of a 15-week ban. So that pragmatically, he's saying that's just not going to happen. It's a bottom-up effort. We got to go with the states. So what I appreciated about what he did say was that he wants to get back to the constitutional order, for lack of a better phrase, that this is what the executive branch can do, and I will do it. And if Congress gets its act together and sends me a 15-week ban or pro-life legislation, I'll sign it.
Here's why SBA is still going to go on the attack on Trump and DeSantis or anyone else who won't go for a 15-week ban. The rationale that they have is if you don't say something that you're in favor of, even if it's true that a 15-week ban will be extremely difficult to get through the Senate because you have the filibuster. So that's what DeSantis is saying. It's really hard, so why should I commit to something that's probably not going to happen anyway? Here's why. If you support a 15-week ban, then you can say, this is what we're in favor of. And there's clarity there. If you don't, then the left will say, oh, you want to get rid of all abortions. Look, almost all abortions are against the law in Florida. That's what you want for the whole country. You just say, I'm 15 weeks. That's something that the American people can go, okay, I can see that. If states want to go further, that's fine. So that's the argument. That's the rationale. Even if it's going to be a hard road to get to a 15-week national ban, you at least have it there so you can define what it is you're in favor of and prevent your opponents from being able to define you in a way that's much more politically difficult to defend. In other words, if you don't support a 15-week ban on a national level, the other side is going to accuse you of wanting to get rid of all abortions anyway, and you don't get the benefit of actually advocating something like that. You get all the negative only. So it's like, so I understand it.
It's a good point.
No, it's interesting. That's why I think your perspective is valuable here, because I think a lot of people look at this and, of course, like anyone with a pro-life stance wants to save as many babies as possible, wants to see action on the federal level, but maybe don't understand how difficult that is to do mechanically, or think about the political rhetoric positioning in, like you said, like SBA going on the attack there. So it's even interesting for me to kind of hear your thoughts on it, because sometimes I see these things, I'm like, yeah, good point. Like, why aren't we a little bit stronger on that? I'd love to see a Catholic president actually be, in favor of putting some limits here. And so it'll be interesting to see going forward. I think just from my observation, a lot of things I've been reading, I think the DeSantis campaign has shrunk, but in a good way. It seems like they're kind of focusing more on strengths and maybe limiting some more weaknesses. I mean, it is going to be very difficult to capture Trump momentum at this point. I mean, it just feels like he is just so far ahead.
Tom, I don't know. I mean, look, I've always thought from the onset of this campaign that Trump it's his to lose. And I just said that DeSantis has an ability, strong governor, purple state. He transformed it to be a red state. He's willing to take on the media. He doesn't back down. I made that comparison to Scott Walker. Scott Walker would say things, and then the Washington Post would say, "You got that wrong. How dare you?" And Scott Walker just folded like a cheap tent. But at least DeSantis is fighting back, so this is so much better, right? But yes, there's a lot of momentum right now for Trump, as I mentioned in the Loopcast before. That again, there's still time. There's still time for DeSantis to turn things around and get things to be competitive. You know what I'm saying? It's just like,
and for Trump to screw up,
possibly.
Really.
I mean, and look, I don't. It's not like, oh, well, what do you want, Josh? Do you want that to happen? Do you want Trump to stumble and DeSantis to take off? Like, actually, you know what I want? I want both of those men to give it their absolute best and put their best fight forward, iron strengthen iron, and we get the better candidate. That's what I want. So whatever is, the case, I'm not playing favorites necessarily. So now, like this idea, like, oh, we got to do all this to help this guy or help that guy, and people get all stuck in their ways. Oh, look at this. Like 3 months ago, it looked like, wow, DeSantis was gonna surpass Trump, and now it looks like the gap is even wider. You know what? You never know. You fast forward to a year from now, and you'll be like, oh, that's how DeSantis pulled it off. Or you'll be like, yeah, why did DeSantis even bother running? Everyone will be a genius in 2020 hindsight, but you don't know. Right. I mean, the thing is, Hillary Clinton had such a massive lead in the Democratic fight for the nomination back in 2008, and people were like, "Oh yeah, Barack Obama, he's really talented. He's got he's great at giving speeches, and people just love his charisma, but he's got no chance." And and it was just like this forever, and then all of a sudden. And he wins Iowa. And then all of a sudden the whole thing changes. And so that's kind of what DeSantis is hoping for. Boy, if I win Iowa, then I could come into New Hampshire and South Carolina and Michigan and things could change. Maybe. Yeah. Or maybe you'll win Iowa and that's it. And that'll be over.
That reminds me
Who knows?
of, I'll never forget where I was. This is for another election, but for the Trump-Hillary election in 2016, I was, not to date myself, but I was in Goretti Hall at Ave Maria University. And I'm like watching the states turn red was like, just the way that everyone set that up to be like, Hillary's going to win. There's no way. Trump has no chance, over and over again. And all of a sudden, slowly, the states start going red. And then all of a sudden, people are out in the quad popping champagne. Like, it was just the craziest. It was just such a wild night. I'll never forget it. And we'll be in for a good 2024, I think. It'll be a very interesting election. But for right now, we got to move into back to school. So it's still August. Don't worry. I'm not saying school's starting now. Some people actually do start in August, which is completely unconscionable to me. I mean, that is summertime. There's no way anyone should be in school in August. But we had some interesting articles come across the desk, and it begs some larger questions that I think are worth discussing here. And what I'm talking about is, so the Kansas City Star, they published an opinion piece, and I want to be very clear, this was an opinion piece. If you read the piece, it was an opinion piece. It was by someone named Melinda Hennenberger. Josh is aware of her work. I had to do a little bit of research after I saw this because I'm like, this seems a little bit bent. So the story is about a family that enrolled their kids in a Catholic school in Blue Springs, Missouri. And so there was a new pastor that came in, Father Sean McCaffrey, and the parents had publicly and written, and then were also publicly opposed to church teaching, specifically on homosexuality. I believe among other things, but I think the main one was church teaching on homosexuality. And they made it very clear. And Father Sean McCaffrey and the school made the decision to disenroll their child for this open dissent of Catholic teaching.
So in other words, it's not like the parents decided we don't want to send our kid anymore. The school itself said, you know what, actually, maybe you're not a fit for the school. Maybe your kid should not go anywhere.
That isn't exactly how Melinda worded it. She was a little bit more dramatic in saying that he was ripped from his loving community that he was a part of, but that's essentially what it was, Josh. So, there's a lot of cases that have come up about this. There was a recent case in Indiana, Starkey v. Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Indianapolis and Roncalli School, where there's teachers that maybe are living a life that is publicly against church teaching, specifically in a lot of cases, homosexuality, things like that. And so in that case, there's a real precedent for, okay, if you're a teacher, you sign the contract, oath of fidelity to the magisterium. If you violate that, you could lose your employment. In this case, we're talking about parents of a child, and the parents, they signed a contract. There was a contract in this case, but a different one. This is kind of the first of a kind. Erica, when you read this article, what did it make you think about, the Catholic Church's ability to retain their teachings, obviously in a way that could come with some punishment?
Right. So, I think punishment is the way that Melinda was characterizing this in her opinion piece, for sure. I worked for a very long time as an administrator at a Catholic hybrid academy, and this issue came up quite a bit because we too, like this school, everyone, the parents who are on staff would sign a covenant very similar that we agree to understand and support the moral and social doctrine of the Catholic Church and know and support the school rules, and that sometimes there are situations where parents have sustained complaints to the school and the diocesan administration where irreconcilable differences arise, and then it's in the best interest of both the family and the school to separate. So it's very clear from the get-go when you sign up for this community that there's this standard. And the purpose of it, and I'm speaking, of course, from the perspective of someone who was an administrator at a school like this, that to preserve the community and to preserve the formation that you're trying to give to the children and the families within the community, sometimes it's better to separate, all right? Sounds like a divorce. It kind of is like one, except that the prenup was pretty clear, people.
But yeah.
Yeah. And, reading through the piece, I was getting kind of PTSD deja vu from my own experiences here. But of course, Melinda, the pastor declined to be interviewed. The school staff declined to be interviewed, as is decorous and right. And she interviewed like the mom in the case who complained about the priest. There's clearly more than just, I disagree with church teaching going on here. There's a lot of personal rancor. And, she said, quote, the priest came in rolling hot, yanking books from the school library shelves, including one about a polar bear with two mommies, and all of Rick Riordan's work, some of which features characters who are gay, bisexual, lesbian, and trans. Whereas I'm thinking, yeah, the priest came in and maybe in a sort of Irish Catholic way, like maybe not with a lot of grace, he was like, these books don't belong here, and he took them off the shelf.
Which we don't know.
Holly,
which we don't know because we didn't talk to the priest. We only got one side.
We only got one side of the story. We only got the angry mom. She used to be vice president of the school's advisory board, clearly is not anymore. And so one starts to piece together, reading the article, this sort of acrimonious picture that goes way beyond we disagree with the church teaching on homosexuality. And I do think, there was a study recently about why Americans are leaving the church in so many droves. Because, of course, the charge that comes is, this is why people leave the church. This is why people aren't coming to Mass anymore.
Maybe.
But,
some of them, sure.
And maybe.
Yeah.
But what this survey found, and I will link it in the show notes as well, was that a lot of people start to say things like, well, the church hates homosexuals, so I left. Or, I hate church hypocrisy because of the sexual abuse crisis. That's a big one. People are like, I left because of that. But when you interview them more fully, you find that it was a personal, acrimonious relationship. There was some kind of personal injury from someone who represents the church. There was some kind of offense given or taken.
And then they reach for that.
And then
they reach
later
for that
on,
like a weapon.
And then they reach for the broader justification of like, I'm on my high moral ground. And so, you know, Holly goes on in the article, the mom, she goes on in the article to say, well, I'm taking a stand for like the rights of gay people. And I think Jesus doesn't want us to be homophobes. And you're like, I don't know, Holly, if that's really the cause of why you're giving this interview about how this priest is just a bear in a bullet. I can't talk. A bear in a china shop, bull in a china shop. And so those are my impressions from the article. But the bottom line is a school community. When you're talking about the formation of young men and women, you have pledged to parents and families you are going to raise them in the Catholic faith. You do as an administrator, as a teacher, as someone who is communicating that mission to these children, you have a right to protect that community and that environment, because kids are it's a fragile time of their lives, and it's okay to put them in a greenhouse for a few years. But you have to keep the greenhouse doing what it's supposed to do, or you could just bust it all out. Wow, my analogies are suffering today.
Beautiful. No, but I mean,
let me drink some more milkshake.
I do want to go back to one point though. Like, there's this idea, like, oh, if the church weren't so strict or so mean, or that, then that's why all these people are leaving. And my mother left the church, right? And she complains about this. And anytime this come up, well, no wonder they're like, if the Catholic Church came around tomorrow and said contraception is fine, we love gays, they can do whatever they want, all this stuff, like, you're going to start going to church again? I mean, like, give me a break. Give me a break.
So. Yeah,
that's a good point.
I just don't believe
I guess
it.
With the education thing's tough. It's tough in a lot of ways, but if you want to give your child a specific education and put them in a specific environment, I don't want to be coy by saying specific, a Catholic. If you want to give your child a Catholic education with a Catholic understanding of the world, with a Catholic foundation, you can't do that if the school is just open to every whim from every parent that comes in and gives their 2 cents.
And here's
right?
the thing. If this mom, if this parent had come up to the priest and said, I got to tell you, I think this is a good school, and I'm glad my child's going here. I actually don't agree with the church when it comes to same-sex marriages. I think it's fine. And the priest might go, I mean, okay, sure. We're still going to teach the Catholic understanding of marriage and man and woman, you know, and God created male and female in the plan. And if the parent says, I know that's what you do and that's what you believe and that's fine, but I think it's kind of crazy, but whatever. That if that happened, the priest might just say, I mean, okay, you know, sure. But if you go out of your way to publicly say, this priest, this terrible, well, yeah, okay, bye-bye.
What do you expect? Right. Well, the thing that was telling to me too, that it's just sort of a snapshot of the American Catholic school system, was that the priest came in, he goes to the school library, and who knows how this actually went down. There's probably a committee. He talked to the committee. He's like, okay, guys, we got to get in line with church teaching with the books we're offering on the shelves to our kids. We're going to start taking the hide the pride stuff off the shelves. Hide the pride, yay. And he probably, like, the fact that those books were on there in a Catholic school library is the entire problem. Like, he shouldn't have been in that position in the first place as a priest, to have to be like, okay, I know that the priests who have been the pastors here for the last 45 years have allowed this stuff.
Or just didn't know about it or whatever.
I'm actually going to pull us. Or didn't know about it because they
weren't
aware.
Quality control. That's what we need for a Catholic faith. We need some quality control.
Amen.
Yeah, I famously told by Mercer, it's like if Coke was in Wisconsin really terrible, and then in Michigan had a different recipe and was really awesome. That would say a lot about Coke, but well, I mean, remember that one from a couple episodes.
Right. I mean, like, McDonald's is just not going to be like, oh, you can have whatever kind of fries, totally different kind of fries. Like, no, it's going to be the same everywhere. Like, we got to exert some sort of quality control. Like, I get it. Like, and that's what frustrates so many Catholics, that like the church tends to go completely blitzkrieg over let's say a right-wing priest like Father Altman, who goes crazy and like, let's say, and then James Martin goes ahead and does whatever he wants to, and it's like, oh, well, we can't discipline on the left. And James Martin, well, what he'll say about these stories is like, they're always going after on the same-sex marriage issue. Why don't they do it for other things like contraception and divorce and premarital marriage?
Which came up in the story.
Listen, it's not like some Catholic school has a music teacher who's like, has 3 wives or something like that. And like, if we found that out, we're like, you got to go, bro.
Yeah, dude.
Like, it's like, give me a break. It's not like, well, why are you okay with that? I mean, it's just like, he loves to frame it like this because he wants to attack the church, and he wants the church to allow all forms of the LGBT rainbow stuff. And he's got, he wants to impress on the church his vision for, God.
Yeah, it's kind of like Jesse Jackson, but gay, like a little bit of like gay baiting kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
like if you could look at every issue and
that's the second time he's come up on this pod.
This is the
Jesse Jackson on the mind.
Pod. Yeah, great voice too, by the way. If you ever go back to some of his speeches, he kills them.
He speaks in iambic pentameter. That's why.
Very talented.
They actually
had him on They actually had him on Saturday Night Live one time. Do Green Eggs and Ham. Read the book.
Oh gosh, look it up.
Yes, I've seen that clip.
Well, you recommended it on this podcast before, and we'll continue to recommend it. It's a phenomenal clip. I think that was before we were doing video on this podcast.
He's still a terrible human, but anyway.
Yeah, but Green Eggs and Ham was sick. Okay, so we move on now to the lifestyle loop chat. So this one kind of wrote itself this week. I came across an article. It was actually shared by Mary Margaret Allahan over at the Daily Signal. Shout out, she's doing great work, phenomenal. So I saw this article from the Washington Post. And so I'll just tell you about the story. It actually won a Pulitzer Prize, which I didn't know. So it is a story of 2 teenagers, Brooke and Billy. They were 19-year-olds when they conceived twin girls. And so the story is supposed to be someone whose life was directly affected by the Texas abortion ban, and then following them through after they had their children, and then to see what their life was like going forward. And so Brooke, Billy, and their baby girls appeared in this story after Roe v. Wade was overturned, and then now they're kind of thrust into this national debate, of course, as we've talked about with abortion. So the original headline was, "This Texas teen wanted an abortion, now she has twins." So, quote from it, "If they didn't have the babies, Brooke and Billy both concede that they probably wouldn't still be together. Their teen romance would have flamed and faded, and now with 2 children, they are permanently linked." I will save my initial reactions for it, but Erica was the first one I sent this to. So, Erica, what was your first reaction to reading this article? How did it make you feel?
Yeah, I mean, my first reaction was just honoring these 2 19-year-olds who have really taken on a tough thing. I mean, they had these baby girls. They love them. The article is so well written, beautiful writing. The author's a Pulitzer Prize winner. So, I mean, very talented. And throughout it, I was just sort of struck by the mental gymnastics that the writer must have had to do, who is clearly very anti-abortion bans, very pro-choice. I mean, she says multiple times throughout the article, she'll like put the word heartbeat, like the twins had a heartbeat. It's in scare quotes.
It was
like, why is that in scare quotes?
So she received an ultrasound at a pregnancy resource center, actually.
At a pregnancy resource center.
Right after, because she couldn't get into an abortion facility to end the life of these kids. And then when she said they were shown the heartbeat of the twins, it was put in quotations. Because
the writer puts
somehow there's out there that it's somehow a fabricated noise done by an electric machine or something, which of course is just ridiculous
right. It's
gymnastics,
electromagnetic
right?
pulses. You're like, look, if you did an ultrasound on my heart, it would be electromagnetic pulses. Like that's what that is.
Crazy.
But anyway, so the author has this cognitive dissonance or this mental gymnastics that she has to do throughout the piece, because there's this beautiful story on the one hand of this guy and this girl who got married. They got pregnant out of wedlock. They got married. They're trying to raise the 2 kids. It says over and over again how Brooke is proud of what they're doing. He went to the Army. They have struggles. They're struggling to stay together. Yeah, Air Force. Sorry about that.
I think you're wanting to read a little more into it, a little more hope and aspiration than there's there, because you look at it as a success story, in other words. And you're like,
no, I look at it as an ongoing struggle story.
I don't think there's any dissonance for the writer. I think the writer is doing a forensic specialist, detailing each and every last challenge and suffering that each of the mom and the dad are having to go through, and how they hate it. And, oh yeah, but we do love giving hugs to the girls, but oh my gosh, she yells at me all the time. Or, oh my gosh, why can't he help out more? Or, you read this article, and the average reader of the Washington Post is like thinking to themselves, gosh, it's pretty obvious that they did not want to have these babies, and therefore this is the conclusion the Washington Post wants you to have.
I
Abortion
understand
should
that.
be allowed.
However,
well, I'm just saying,
no, but what I'm trying to read in the story is to see what's really happening here and what the writer had to do in order to get that message across. And I don't think she did it. I think she just does this. But what she had to do was to discount the humanity of those girls and the idea, and this is the Judeo-Christian idea, that it is worth suffering and self-sacrifice and trying to work through a marriage that you hadn't planned for. There's no mention of abuse. There's no mention of anything like going on there. That's a whole other question.
Sure, but
that is worth it to give a life to these two children. And Brooke even says in the story, she said, I want to give these two girls a home where the parents love each other or at least stick together. And that is worth doing. But the writer does not see that. The writer doesn't see it. And that's heartbreaking.
Yeah, there's some merit there. But I mean, the fact is, like, this is almost like a perfect example, in the left-wing media's mind of this is why we need abortion.
I understand
because
that, right.
They uproot their lives.
Tragic.
I mean, give the man some credit. He decides to get a higher paying job, which is good. However, it's with the military, and then he has to move from Corpus Christi. They move to Tampa. So, he and his wife and their two little twin daughters. And the problem with that is, well, you don't have his family and her family and all your friends. So you could kind of take a break and say, can you watch the girls and let us go on a date night or whatever? And so then they talk about it in Tampa where she wanting to drop the twins off and at a new friend that she found to watch the kids so they can go on a date night. And there's a bunch of weirdos and a guy holding a bottle of tequila.
Bottle, yeah.
And you're like, everything about the story just screams danger, everything. And so I think we have to be honest. This is why, it's good that he stepped up and got a higher paying job, but he shouldn't have got one where he would have basically leave his wife to raise the two children and be kind of a prisoner in her apartment. At least if she's back in Corpus Christi, then she can lean on her parents and his parents and friends and family. And there's that extended network, which is so helpful, to help you raise a child. And if you don't have that, it gets that much harder. And so I just
especially when you're young. Yeah.
Oh my
gosh.
An
interesting take.
By the time these two twin girls are, let's say, in preschool and elementary school, it'll be another 3 or 4 years. And she'll be able to drop them off at school and she can maybe work as a bank teller for a few hours or whatever and do something else. And by that time, she's going to have a few more friends that she'll know because she'll have been in Tampa now for that many more years and she'll have friends. But it's still kind of new. And she's still in this new town. And so it just paints a pretty bleak picture. And this is I guess the point that pro-lifers would say is, the pro-aborts would say, see, it wouldn't be great if she could have murdered her children. The worst thing. No, murdering children is not the answer to this problem. However, if we had a pro-life culture of life from the get-go, then 18-year-olds aren't having reckless sex. So yes, actually, the children should be a part of the picture if this is the approach you're taking to how you live your life. In other words, you should be responsible. If we had a culture of life and raising our children so that when they're 18 years old and they're adults and they have adult bodies, that they may, hey, save it for marriage. That's the way it's supposed to be.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt there.
I'm glad that
Erica's got something to say.
No, I'm going to interrupt there because we can have that, and I agree that is what we should be working for, creating in our own community, in our communities, and in communities out there. Going out and helping to support that. But even in pro-life communities, kids have sex outside of marriage and beforehand.
No, I know, of course.
We've all experienced that, but the difference between the stories of women, my personal friends whose children have had kids before they got married, it was unexpected. When that happens in a pro-life community, it can be an amazing thing because you have that support. Like, I have seen families just drop everything to support the girl, to get the two with a priest, to get them the support that they need. They can live, the mom can live with her family, he can live with his. They end up, sometimes they get married.
Right.
All of that support, they can go back to school because they have
institutions
people.
Are important, not just
exactly.
families, right?
Right.
So, like,
the family,
if
the
this
church.
couple found a church, that would
Right.
help. If and also at the end, she started linking in with other military wives. Like again, crucial. Like use those support systems, and then you can get a little bit of relief there.
Yeah.
Right, but if I could, because they've followed them around for such a short period of time now, I think it's important to, first off, whoever wrote this is extremely talented. I was gripped the whole time. Of course, it was jarring to hear the occasional, activist language of like quotes around the heartbeat or talking about, they wouldn't use the word children. They were talking about like unplanned pregnancies and ending that and things like that.
Yeah, of course.
But
vile.
Which of course, but me reading it, like I just read the story of a young man or a boy and a girl having through this event being forced to become a man and a woman. These are all problems these are all stressors that anyone that has a child experiences. So even if you are married and you have a child, you experience these problems. Like my son just turned 1. Like my wife and I still have trouble getting out for date nights from time to time. We had to discover how to still like keep romance alive when you're like constantly sleep deprived and just going from thing to thing. And like now all of a sudden she's a mom and she's, nagging you to do whatever, or I'm just tired and mad or whatever. Like everything they went through was a very normal life type struggle that anyone with kids has.
No,
and I thought
true.
Categorized really well.
Okay.
So just her writing it, I thought was interesting because I basically saw that event turn them into a man and a woman and become virtuous, right?
But they're virtuous for certainly a man. There's growing pains with it. My point.
But those pains made them virtuous. Is my point.
You could okay. But my point with my biggest problem with this whole article though is, again, I feel like the writer was being like a forensic specialist, detailing all the little slights and miseries and how he just wanted to live a life being a skateboarder and hang with his friends till well into his 20s and play video games. And now he's having to do, a higher paying job and watch his kids. Like,
right,
oh
but every kid
life
would
sucks.
say that.
Yes.
Every kid would say that.
Okay, but like this writer isn't looking for like the redeeming moment either. It's only emphasizing the struggle parts of this story. And so that's, you and I are the three of us are able to see that there's some growth there. There's some personal development there, but the writer is not conveying it. We're able to pick it up between the lines, but this writer is just saying what drudgery for these teenagers.
Yes, exactly.
Because the writer's like, you should be able to have consequence-free sex from age 18 to 26 until you finally decide you found the one that's right for you, and then you get married. Then you might decide to have kids when you're like 32 or 33 or something like that. That's the modern Washington Post approved, family creation lifestyle thing. And so that's what this writer's trying to say. Like, this is so miserable. How do we allow this to happen at these 18-year-olds who would have aborted these 2 babies? Why do they have to? And look how terrible it is. I mean, I know you guys are finding some good, like, little diamonds in the rough here. No, but this writer is no doubt trying to say abortion is necessary.
Right. I understand all those things, but we're all talking about the same article that we all read, and we're talking about the same things that we're observing. You're just talking about the motivations of the writer.
Oh, she tries.
What I would say, right, but I would say when I read this, I think she actually failed in a way because what she described to me after reading it made me want to root and encourage these two on for their courageous decision, maybe even if it was forced, but to become good parents. And like those are decisions that everyone has to make.
Okay.
And so yes, she's going to put in her 2 cents about how this would all be gone without an abortion.
Yes,
but
you can find something.
My view, right?
Yeah, you can find some inspiration.
Which I'm talking about my view.
Well,
right. I'm talking about my view. I'm not talking about what the general public is going to be. I think that what they were forced through causes them to become virtuous and grow into men and women, and that should be encouraged. Now, the follow through here is, like you said, community is key. If she would have had a few friends or some support, that would make a world of difference to her children, and her husband. And that's why church communities are great because, for example, we get our babysitters from our church community, right? Like we want to educate our child, church community. That's why like the solutions we have to offer. And then on a policy level, we need to support people in that position, right? If we can't have a government support a pro-family outlook when people have kids, because right now we're struggling as a nation to turn over the birth rate, right? a serious country would do that. A non-serious country would, of course, encourage just aborting children, ending it, and then allowing people to, seek out their dreams, live their best life, whatever. But like, I read this and actually found a lot of, she almost failed because it was almost too beautiful. And I hope other people saw it that way. Of course, minus the activist language. And when the kids read it one day are going to be like, you really wrote this? Like, you could have killed us, and that would have been a good thing. So I think that's something to really sit with and think about. So, yeah, Mercer, I had to get that one out there, dude. I know what you're saying.
I'm just saying that you could read this. You two could read this article and say, gosh, I got inspired because I could see the progress in these kids. I'm just saying, great. That's fine and all well and good. But the other 85% of the people reading this article are going to be like, yeah, maybe abortion's not the worst idea anyway, because, yeah, gosh. So it's a very pro-abortion article.
100%.
Erica.
Yes,
we
sir.
move into the Twilight Zone.
Twilight Zone. Well, speaking of, I think you have a clip for me, Tom. This was you have to hear this or see this for those on YouTube.
Submitted to the producer beforehand. Okay, here we go.
When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
That was Kamala Harris on July 14th. So we're going to reduce population. The very next day, July 15th, the White House explains that Harris actually meant pollution, not population. But honestly, guys, I think she said the quiet part out loud right here. She said what she meant, and that is reduce the population. This is not new.
She does support that. I think
she does support reducing population.
Feels like a stretch.
Yeah, I think she said what she meant. For 200 years, we had utility. We had started with John Stuart Mill, right? We had Malthusists, the feminist movement, and then, of course, the 1968 population bomb crowd. But they really, this elitist view that people really are the problem. And I wanted to point to an article in this month's edition of First Things by Matthew Crawford, where he talks about anti-humanism. He talks about it more in terms of technology and the groups of people who are designing things. Like he uses driverless cars as an example, but the idea that, and this is from his article, he says, quote, human beings are stupid, we are obsolete, we're fragile, and we're hateful. And he said, I submit that these four premises are mutually supporting and that together they serve to legitimize and usher in more fully the post-political condition, meaning where we're just ruled by our elites and our technology, we don't have to think anymore, and we can all breathe cleaner air because the climate will be saved because we didn't vote for MAGA Republicans, which is why it's so hot in August.
Did you see the CNN graphic about the hottest month? Did you see that?
No, I didn't. Tell me.
So they made a quote graphic about it being the hottest day in history or something like that, which is already kind of a disputed claim.
Yeah.
But they used a picture of a field on fire, and they photoshopped in like 3 people, and the people they photoshopped in had masks and were wearing sweaters.
Oh, that's amazing.
Well, maybe you shouldn't wear a sweater to a prairie fire.
Yeah. Unless you want to end it quickly. I mean, oh my gosh.
Like CNN's not sending their best, man. They need a new graphic to sell.
CNN.
All right.
Mostly
Josh,
peaceful.
Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I guess the Twilight Zone is, again, I hate to be the guy that points out the hypocrisy because I just know the leftist media just doesn't care. But, Senator Mitch McConnell, he's a Republican minority leader in the Senate, and he was at a press conference, and then he just froze. And he froze for almost like a minute. And he just, like his brain stopped. And people are like, did he have a stroke? What happened? He later said, I'm fine. I was just dehydrated or whatever. And then he went back and answered more questions he'd ever done before or whatever. So he's just trying to show people I'm back at it or whatever. But, again, you have these situations like this comes right off the heels of Dianne Feinstein. She's the senator from California. She's, I think, 178 years old. And so she was sitting there and like in the Senate and like someone basically an aide goes, vote aye. And she goes, aye. It's just
that was
like
awkward.
totally
That's bad.
asleep at the wheel. And so you just get the situation where you're like, you look at the founding documents, these great legends of the United States, and it's like James Madison was like 25. We worked on the Constitution. Some of these other guys were like 28, 29, 30. And they're like, well, we should have like a minimum age to serve in the House. You have to be at least 25 years old. You have some experience. You have to be at least 30 to serve in the Senate. You have to be at least 35 to be president. Those are all minimum age requirements. Maybe we should have some maximum age limits. I mean, honestly, like Joe Biden's 80. Dianne Feinstein, I think she's 88 or 92.
89.
Or I mean,
she's 89.
Oh, she's up there.
Yeah.
It's bad.
And so you're like, and it's not just one side. I mean, like, Mitch McConnell's in his 80s. Chuck Grassley, I actually like him. He's a good senator, but like, dude, you're like 90 years old or 88 or like, and he's running for re-election. It's like, really? There's no one else in Iowa that could do a job. I just don't understand this.
I have to say that the Mitch McConnell incident did inspire some of the greatest Babylon Bee headlines of all time. Who can forget?
Thanks.
Are you at a nursing home or the U.S. Senate chamber? 9 clues to look for. And then it goes on. Aide pushes cart through the halls of Congress yelling, "Bring out your dead." It was amazing.
They're like,
They
we don't
were
know
on
what
a
to do with
roll.
Grandpa. Should we send him to a nursing home or have him run for Senate? I mean, it's good. It's good.
Thank you,
Seriously.
Babylon Bee. You
It's
make
the
it all
only way
better.
we can kind of deal with this issue. But like, you would think there could be some bipartisan, effort on this. Like, hey, if you're, maybe 80 is enough. Like, there's nothing wrong with people in their 80s. Like, go for it, live your life, but like, retire, like, do something
Right.
else.
Enjoy
Like,
your
you
doing
don't
work
need
so
to be
hard.
in the Senate.
There's other ways to avoid your grandkids. You could just like play golf or something, or you could not
Ooh.
acknowledge them for a long time.
Yeah.
Oh,
Ouch.
sorry, that was a little bit too
Yeah.
close to home.
Well, I mean, if
going
you
on?
see now, Tom, you were probably 2 years old back then, but during the 1996 presidential campaign, the media made
I wasn't
He
such
was
alive.
not
an
born. Yeah.
I was
No,
alive.
Tom. No pogos.
There's not even a pogo. In the 96
pogo.
presidential campaign, the media made such a big deal about how youthful and vigorous, and Bill Clinton was, and how old Bob Dole was, right? Dude, both Biden and Trump are older than Bob Dole. And they're both running for president. It's like, what in the world? Like, the idea of an 80-year-old president, and if Trump wins, he will also end up being 80 by the time his second term's done. Like, that's just,
I don't have to
that's
imagine that we're living it
old.
right now. President Biden is 80, right?
He is 80. Yeah.
Yeah. It's time for some youth. So, my Twilight Zone. So, it was over the weekend. I was supposed to pick up my sister-in-law to have her get a car. So I had to stay up artificially late. I definitely would not be staying up this late. But I found
late
on
is late?
YouTube, I think this was like 11:30.
No, that's late.
I was like, yeah, dude, I need to sleep.
He has a
man. I need to
1-year-old.
sleep.
It's
I am
late.
such a night owl, yo. I went to bed routinely, but it's summer, so I go to bed between midnight and 1 every night.
Oh no, I would love to go.
I would
I usually
die.
hit at like 10:30, so I was up. So I
working
come
at
across this
10:30.
debate.
Give me a break.
If you guys are familiar with the Whatever podcast, we've talked about it on here before. So Lila Rose and Kristen Hawkins engaged in a debate with this guy Destiny, and Destiny is a
The guy's
a
name is
leftist
Destiny?
debater.
The guy's
The
name
guy's
is
name is
Destiny.
Destiny. His show name.
Probably not his baptismal name.
No,
Yeah,
I doubt he
guessing
was
not.
named that.
Sounds like a
So
stage name.
This is going to confuse some people who aren't familiar, who aren't terminally online, but basically he's a streamer and he will play video games and basically debate people while he streams, or he's just known to be a really high IQ who has leftist ideas. And so Kristen and Lila went on and, I'd have to say Trent Horn described it as a missed opportunity. I felt like that was probably the most charitable way of putting it. It's kind of a train wreck. It really seemed odd that there was 2-on-1, and then it really got kind of nasty at points, and it just didn't seem like a very good, representation of the pro-life argument. And so Trent Horn, I guess, reached out to the producer, Brian, of this show, and he said that he'd like to come on to potentially present a pro-life argument that, hopefully could be a little bit more successful. And so he comes back on with Destiny, and the Twilight Zone and all this I was riveted to this debate, partially because I was surprised at how well and how respectful it was done. And I thought that both Trent Horn and Destiny's abortion positions were both like light years more humane than the status quo. Trent Horn's was more of a natural law argument, saying that life begins at conception until natural death, which is a pretty classic argument. And then Destiny's is that he believes a person becomes a person when they have a human conscious experience, which we didn't exactly get a full definition of, but that happens somewhere between 20 and 28 weeks. So he said he'd be comfortable with a 20-week ban. And so really interesting back and forth from them. I think there were some areas where both of them were really strong and both of them maybe weren't as strong, but was impressed that we could have an actual substantive debate on abortion from a intellectual perspective and then also a rhetoric and debate and logic perspective. And so, yeah, I was sucked into this thing. It was like 3 hours long. It didn't matter. I mean, I had time to kill, but man, I just was like enthralled by this. And I really appreciated Destiny being very logically consistent and having at least a much more humane stance than most leftists would, which of course is, abortion for any reason at any time up to the second of birth, even partial birth abortion. And I just wish that we could kind of move the needle that way and be able to engage on an intellectual level like this. So shout out Trent Horn, man. I know he's been at it for a while with Catholic Answers. Love to have you on for an interview sometime. If anyone's listening and knows Trent, would love to get in touch with him. But yeah, shout out. I just thought it was such a cool, I mean, I'm a sucker for good debate, but that was really good. And so that does it for this week's Loopcast. If you guys are looking for more, so I did an interview with Charlie Seraphin. He is, kind of a Dos Equis most interesting man in the world type guy, but Catholic and a great radio voice. He's lived probably 3 full lives. He was a veteran radio host, news executive. He also worked at the Texas Rangers and Kansas City Royals in their marketing departments. He's written books. He talked to David Koresh on the phone. He put him on the radio station. He got invited to the White House by Ronald Reagan. I mean, the guy is just like one of the coolest guys ever. I think it was kind of a cool moment for me because I felt like I was interviewing an interviewer, and he actually gave me some tips. So if you want to hear me improve in real time, I asked for tips during the episode.
That's great.
And I was definitely humbled a few times. I mean, this guy has like the best radio voice, fantastic interviewer, great guy. So if you guys are looking for something to go listen to, it's right before this one. It's the bonus episode. As always, ways to help the program. We are almost at 300 reviews on Apple Podcasts. I do watch that very closely. That's a good milestone for us. Josh said he'd fire me if we don't get past that. So throw me a few reviews. That's a real threat.
It's called tough
so
love.
let's get to 300.
Yikes.
Yeah, we really appreciate you guys. And we sign us off with Our Lady of Guadalupe, St. Fidelis, and St. Thomas More. Pray for us. We'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.